What's good, everybody? I'm Webb, and this is Over Quota, where I interview founders, CEOs, sales leaders, and top enterprise software salespeople about the keys to consistently exceeding sales expectations. Now, my goal is to give listeners something in addition to the sales coaching that they might already be getting by listening to how other sales leaders and top software salespeople, how they've been achieving their success. Now, before I introduce my guest, I should mention that my company, the J. David Group, is sponsoring this podcast. My company helps high-growth software companies recruit top software salespeople. So if you're interested in learning more about that, go to the jdavidgroup.com/hiring to learn more. We can schedule a call, or go to the jdavidgroup.com/looking if you're looking for your next big challenge. Now, my guest today is David. Is it pronounced Gerry? I should have asked you before. Is it Gerry or Gerry?
Gerry.
Gerry, okay. My guest today is David Gerry. He's the Chief Revenue Officer and Head of Global Operations at White Hat Security, which helps companies accelerate the deployment of secure applications and websites. Dave, welcome to Over Quota.
Thanks for having me, Jay. Thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. So let's just start there. Talk to me a little bit about what White Hat does and the value proposition that it offers its customers, and then give me a little more of a sense of your role there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in a really exciting space. So we exist in this market called application security. So our job is to help our customers deploy secure applications to market. So that can come across a number of different areas, right? That can come across your traditional web applications, and we have a team of over 100 ethical hackers that can help our customers understand the vulnerabilities that exist in their application and actually help them remediate that and give them some guidance on what they should do better next time from a secure coding best practice. We also look at your traditional legacy applications from a static code analysis perspective, where we're doing actual code reviews of the application and helping to educate the development organization on what they could do differently to instill secure coding best practices into their entire development process, and making sure that they understand why something was a vulnerability, how it could potentially be exploited, and most importantly, how do they make sure they avoid that in the future? And we really act as a bridge between development and security, right? If you think about the development organization, these are not security experts. If you think about a cybersecurity team, they're not development experts, right? A lot of times they're speaking two different languages. Security is hyper-focused on making sure that they're securing the enterprise as best they can and reducing that enterprise risk. Sometimes that makes them move a bit more slowly than they may like to. The development team, on the other hand, is saying, I need to get this application to market as quickly as possible because I have business needs that I need to hit. So we help bridge that gap and help them understand how can you balance that risk while also making sure that you're getting those applications out to market as quickly as possible.
Can you
so
quantify?
My role,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so my role here is really exciting. I love what I do every day, and I have the pleasure and the opportunity to work with our entire revenue organization. So revenue here at White Hat is everything from your sales development reps all the way through enterprise sales into post-sales, where we get into customer success and actually the service delivery engine that's providing this value back to our customers. So all in, our revenue organization is about 230 folks. Which is obviously a really big team, and it gives us the ability to have a central view into that entire customer journey, right? And we can really understand what are the different pieces of this journey, how can we make this the most seamless process possible for our clients, and most importantly, how can we get them the value that they're ultimately trusting us with, right? How do we make sure we become good stewards of the trust that they've placed in us by partnering with us as their security partner?
And can you quantify who your customers are in terms of size, or how would you go about doing that, and maybe vertical?
Yeah, so we are working primarily with the enterprise software space, right, and enterprise clients. So our traditional client is going to be a Fortune 500 business, typically in financial services, insurance. So anything in the security realm is typically going to be in highly regulated markets, right? And these are the folks that have secure and highly confidential customer data. Privacy is at the core of what they do. And ultimately, they're trying to protect all of the information that their clients give to them and allow them to continue to conduct business. So those are really the core folks that we typically work with.
And I know that White Hat was recently acquired, I think sometime over the summertime. Is that right?
We were, yeah. So we've been in business now for close to 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a amazing opportunity to have an exit and ultimately an acquisition event with NTT Security. So for those of you that don't know NTT, they are based out of Japan. It's NTT holding company. It's about a $105 billion organization globally.
Mm-hmm.
The security business unit is about 2,000 of the world's best security experts,
Mm-hmm.
and they absorbed White Hat into that. We're still operating as an independent, wholly owned subsidiary, but we have the opportunity to really tap into this incredible market of talent and additional portfolio of offerings and provide even more value to our customers than we historically had been able to do, right? There are always gaps as a startup in what you can and cannot go to market with.
Mm-hmm.
This gave us the opportunity, and a really unique one, to partner with one of the most forward-thinking cybersecurity firms, right? These guys are on a mission to become the dominant cybersecurity company in the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? NTT Security is solely focused on the cybersecurity industry. And one of the big gaps that they noticed in talking with all of their enterprise clients is organizations are struggling with application security, right? And that's why it made so much sense for them to go partner with us and ultimately make the acquisition with us, because it did give them that additional platform play that they could come in and help secure that entire development environment for those customers.
I want to talk about how that impacted your sales organization. But before we get into that, of the 230 folks that you mentioned in your purview, so to speak, how many of them are quota carrying salespeople?
Yeah, so when we think about true salespeople, we have about 30 to 35.
Okay.
Those are going to be hybrid, mid-enterprise, SMB, or traditional inside sales, and then our enterprise field folks, including our major accounts.
Mm-hmm.
We also have quota-carrying customer success managers, right? So this is a blended CSM, AM type role.
Mm-hmm.
So when we factor those folks in, we have about 55 to 60 true quota-carrying folks, and then a team of about 20 SDRs that obviously carry their own somewhat different quotas.
Got it. Yep. Okay. Okay. I know, obviously, and you wrote about this recently, where mergers and acquisitions can sometimes, have an impact. Oftentimes, puts a strain on the sales organization. Tell me and the audience a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, as at our core, nobody likes change.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're going from being able to operate as a very agile, very nimble startup to working within the constraints that come as being part of a bigger organization, there's always challenges that exist, right? When we look at the profile of folks that we need to now go after, and this has been one of the biggest fundamental changes for us, and we're really lucky in that our core enterprise sales team has been here for 8 or 9 years, right? So when I had the opportunity to join this team just about 3 years ago last month, one of the things that really struck me was the commitment that these folks have to White Hat. Mm-hmm. And when I look at that as a sales leader, right, salespeople don't stay unless they have the opportunity to make money, right? Unless our customers truly believe in what we do, there's a market for it. So we've been really lucky where those folks have stuck with us. But as we look at how we move forward and the profile that we need to go after, we're no longer going after that super hungry, equity-driven sales rep, right? This is not your traditional startup sales rep that we're going after, right? We've had to switch our profile. And that profile is somebody that understands how do they work within the world of being an overlay, right? How do they work and partner with all of these different NTT opcos and all these different organizations to make sure we're driving business forward, right? Do they understand and are they able to grasp all of the additional service offerings that come with this, right? So there's a lot of differences that happen. This is not just your traditional hard charging head through the wall sales organization anymore. This is one where we need to be very thoughtful. We need to be very process driven. We need to understand and take time to invest in this team and make sure that they can learn everything that they need to in terms of all of these additional product offerings that we have.
Why is that so important? In other words, because it's not a hard charging sort of headstrong sales organization, if you continued on that path,
Mm-hmm.
how would that affect sales on a daily basis, or just even your sales cycle and how you communicate with your customers?
Yeah. So the first fundamental shift is there are a lot of sales professionals that are incredibly equity driven, right? They want to go work for a startup and get their equity stake. We don't have equity at this point, right? We've had our equity event. So that is one area where recruiting becomes a big challenge to go after some of those folks. Now, we have all the opportunities where we can show them career progression. We're growing well above what the market is growing at. We're growing and adding some of the most amazing logos, right? When we look at our logos every quarter, we have a really great set of customers that continue to buy more from us over time, right? So those are all the positives. The challenge is your traditional startup sales rep doesn't have the experience working with multiple layers of channel partners, right? And that ultimately is what NTT becomes to us, right? They are one of the world's largest channel partners, right? These are the same folks that own Dimension Data. These are the same folks that have made major security acquisitions in the US here with Solutionary and some of these other firms, right? So there are, in our business unit, which is NTT Limited, there's about 30 different opcos that we work with. Now, everything routes through NTT Security, but those are 30 channel partners that we need to understand what are their goals, what are they metriced on, what is their quota. They own the customer relationship, right? So this becomes a lot more of being able to navigate all of the intricacies of how you go to market with these partners and making sure that you, number one, are trying to close a deal. Number two, and probably most importantly, you're actually providing value not only to your customer, which we've been really good at doing, but also providing value back into those channel partners. And you need to make them understand, how do we help them move their business forward, right? So it is a slightly different mentality. It's not just about, we need to go close a deal, right? That's always important. We need bookings to survive as a business, but this comes down to, how do we fundamentally build ourselves as a core piece of their service offerings and then work with those channel partners to get those to market.
And I know communication is important through this kind of a transition, especially, I would imagine, you can tell me a little bit about it in terms of retaining. You mentioned those 8 or 9 enterprise reps, right? That have been with you, and naturally, people usually call me when these things happen, and they get skittish and they get concerned. Oh, my company's being acquired. They just got acquired by a PE firm or whatever. How are you, as a sales leader, emphasizing the way that you communicate and lead people through that, so you end up retaining the right people, and then also, I guess, reevaluating and looking at the certain skill sets that individuals have to say, okay, this person's playing out of position right now. Let's see if he or she wants to do this, or maybe we offer them a package and they go. Just give me some thought around that.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally this comes down to, what do we all want, right? And what we want is, as salespeople, right, and stepping back into a true sales role, we want the opportunity to make money. We want the opportunity to feel like we're being told the truth, that we have authentic leadership, and that we are being heard, right? And that's really where I've focused as we've navigated our way through this. And everything's not perfect, right? There's always going to be challenges. And the approach that I've taken is that we need to be overly transparent. And this is something that we're really lucky here. This stems all the way from our CEO, right? We sometimes, I think, are almost too transparent, right? Which is an odd thing to say, right? But we do try to be as open and honest with our teams as we possibly can be. And one of the phrases that I use is, you'll always know where you stand with me. You'll always understand an answer. You'll get an answer from me. It just might not be the one that you like. So this has been an opportunity for us to really go back and re-recruit that team that we have, right? Help them understand, look at the opportunity you have in front of you. One of the things that we did is we didn't raise quotas. So this is now the 3rd or 4th year that we have not raised the quotas of the enterprise team. And what we'll see this year is that the vast majority of our enterprise reps will actually be over quota by the end of the year. So we're trying to have a bit of that. Let's talk through what your concerns are. Let's understand what those concerns are. But then also look at all the opportunity that we have in front of us, right? This was not a PE firm that came in and is now looking to cut costs. This is an organization that's come in that's looking to significantly increase the investment back into White Hat to help us on the technology side, to help us on the go-to-market side, to help us with customer introductions. And we now have the world's largest channel, right? If we're talking about a channel program, at our disposal, and we're part of the family, right? So for me, it's been an easy conversation to re-recruit these folks because they have an incredible opportunity in front of them. And the vast majority of our reps are hitting their number, and most importantly, making money. right? So as long as what we've found is as long as we're over communicating and we are being as transparent as we can and building those personal relationships, at the end of the day, 50 or 60 people, I can have a personal relationship with most of them, right? And it may not be to a super deep degree, but I can have a relationship where they know that they can always call me. They can hit me on Slack. They can get on my calendar and we can talk through any of the concerns that they have. So to your point, Jay, it really comes down to that communication.
And what about the folks that, you know, let's say there are questions, right? In other words, you're not sure where they'll fit in or if their strengths, you know, complement or supplement the change that you're making in your sales organization. So when you look at like the behaviors and the traits that you want to see in those people or just your overall organization, what are those traits and behaviors that you're looking for to say, okay, these are the ones that I want to ride with. These are the ones that I still want to have on our team. And maybe actually, you know what, and let me just expound upon that a little bit, because you were talking about the 8 or 9 folks that have been there over the last 8 or 9 years. And I would imagine that, you know, 1 or 2 of those guys or women are at the top of that. What are they exhibiting? What are they showing that you can that you're looking for in the other people?
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there. So first and foremost, we haven't lost any employees as we've gone through this in terms of us having to make any changes to our business, right? So that's been the first fundamental thing, that they've seen additional investment. They haven't seen us pulling back at all, right? So that was the first piece where we haven't had to make those hard decisions and exit anybody out for any reason outside of maybe they wanted to leave or whatever it might be, a new opportunity. When we look at how I would go about those conversations, first and foremost, I truly believe that there is a role for everybody to be successful. And what we've seen here is we've had reps that historically had missed their number. They had come in well under plan. They weren't making any money, and we tweaked their role. We put them into a new role. And then some of those are now my top performers, right? I have one guy in particular where we had the conversation where, hey, listen, this isn't working. We're going to give you some time. Go see what you can find. He then transitioned into a major accounts role and is now our number 1 guy. And that truly, to me, says there's an opportunity for everybody to be successful, and we need to continue to invest in our people, right? So that truly, at my core, that's what I believe, right? So there's always an opportunity for somebody to be successful. Now, what I look for when I'm hiring a rep, it really comes down to a couple of things, right? There is a DNA that exists within top performing salespeople, right? You probably see it when you're recruiting people and you're interviewing people. I certainly see it when they get over to me and I start talking with them. You understand what it takes to be successful, right? You might have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder. You might have something that's going to keep you motivated beyond money, beyond ego, beyond all those things. What is fundamentally going to keep you motivated when it is the hardest job you've ever done, right? This is not an easy world to live in, right? We live quarter to quarter. You're a hero one quarter, you could be gone the next. So they need to have something intrinsically in them that says, I am going to be successful and I have something to prove to the world. The next thing I look for is, are they process oriented? So we run Medic here at White Hat. I've run it for most of my career. And fundamentally, I don't care if they know Medic. What I care about is, do they operate according to a process? We pride ourselves here on forecast accuracy. You only get to forecast accuracy by having a sales process and a sales methodology that you follow. And we've actually, over the last 3 years, forecasted plus or minus 1%. So whatever we call at the beginning of the quarter to our actual forecast, plus or minus 1%, right? Now, you could say, okay, there's some sandbagging in there. There's other things, right? But that is a hard thing to do consistently year after year after year, right? And this is on a quarterly basis. We roll these up. So I want to understand, are they somebody that has the process and the mentality to follow a sales process, right? The rest of it I can train. I can train them on Medic. I can help them learn our sales process, learn our tools, learn our POC process, all of those things. But do they actually understand how to follow that process? And after that, it truly does come down to cultural fit, right? We are really big on investing in our culture here at White Hat. It's something that our head of people, places, and culture has invested incredibly heavily in over the last 3 years. And we make sure that every single person we interview actually goes through a cultural interview, right? It may be with somebody totally outside the revenue organization, But we need to make sure that when we look at our core values, we're not just talking about our core values. We are truly living those, right? We want to have fun. We want to have accountability. We want to have trust, right? All of these things are core to who we are as a business. And this ultimately comes through to their customers, right? I always look for a sales rep or a sales candidate or sales leadership candidate to be able to provide customer references, right? If you've been doing this long enough, there is always a customer that you have sold to that you can then call on and say, I need your help. I'm going to XYZ organization. Number one, what do you think about it? Number two, would you be willing to speak with them and talk about how I maintain my reputation in the space and all of that, right? Ultimately, this comes down to your personal reputation. And I remember I was at a company probably going back about a decade now, and one of our VCs came in and said, you will sell to the same 100 people for the vast majority of your career. Now, those 100 people are going to change in terms of what company they work for and all of that. But those relationships, those pieces of reputation that you're building all throughout that time, those are going to be the same people that you're selling to for the next 10, 20, 30 years.
If you had number one and number two there, right? Somebody that was intrinsically hungry and had an understanding of, just a competitive fire, so to speak, and that they were process driven, right? They had a process that they followed, and it was consistent. And to your point, even on the individual level, right? You never want to have a salesperson who can't really tell you how they've been successful, right? Because that's just, it's a risk. It's kind of like now, like I have, I remember when we were in school and I talked to somebody else about this as well, but math, right? When you say, show me your long division, right? Just don't tell me, how to divide 4 into 12.
How'd you get there?
Yeah. How'd you get there? Right. So that's important. But let's say, for instance, they have number 1 and number 2, but number 3, they're not so strong in. Are they a no, or how do you, I want to know how strongly you look at culture fit.
We look at culture really hard, right? We've made some really hard decisions with some of our top performers because they're not a good cultural fit, right? We have the internal policy that no matter how good you are, if you don't fit in, if you don't collaborate, if you don't follow our core values, you're not going to be here, right? And it's a hard decision, right? When I sit down with my VP of sales, my VP of customer success, and tell them, hey, we have an issue here with one of your top performers, that's a hard conversation to have, right? That's one that nobody ever wants to have. Thankfully, we haven't had to do it very often, right? Typically, we've been able to work with our folks, but when we're hiring from the outside, you know this better than I do, right? The amount of time and the amount of money that we invest in our people when we're trying to ramp them up, when we're bringing somebody new on board, we have to make sure we get that right. Culture is a big piece of that, right? You can be the greatest salesperson in the world, but if you're not a good cultural fit internally, the answer is you're probably not going to be a great cultural fit with our customers either. And that ultimately is going to hurt us in the long run. So we are going to make the hard decision either on the front end of the interview, or if they've come on board and we've missed something, no, we'll try to learn from that. We'll try to do better next time, but we'll also make the hard decision very quickly. And we want to fail as quickly as we can, right? It's not fair to us. It's not fair to the candidate if we keep them on for a long time knowing that they're not a good fit.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's go back to the person that you mentioned earlier, that you found a new position for internally and had struggled. I just want to sort of dig into that a little bit more. Yeah. What were they struggling with? Like why were they struggling, and what changed? I know the role changed, but I'm guessing there was probably maybe more to it than that.
Well, I think it really came down to understanding what were they really good at, what did they struggle with, and let's make sure we tailor a role to what are they really good at, right? And it's really as simple as that. It was, this person is incredible at managing large, complex deals and accounts. Customers love this person. This person is one of our go-to in terms of there's a big customer or a big deal that needs work. We're going to make sure this person is involved to help close that deal. It really was as simple as we were not utilizing their strengths to the best that we possibly could. And that's on us, right? That's a failure of leadership. When we look at people in our organization struggling, we need to take a hard look at where did we drop the ball in terms of enablement? Where did we drop the ball in terms of supporting them? How do we make sure that they are successful? If they get to us as an enterprise sales rep, they probably have been successful once or twice before. right? So it's not that we're doing something so unique that if they can't be successful here, we have a bigger problem that we need to go back and really look at. And that's one of the things over the last 3 years, Jay, that I've been really proud of is we've taken an organization that historically had struggled, right? We were missing our number for a number of years in a row. We brought on a new leadership team in 2017 and ultimately helped drive this business forward to ultimately having an incredibly successful exit with one of the biggest cybersecurity companies in the world at a valuation well above what was going on in the market at the time, and gave us the opportunity to really reinvest in our people, our customers, and ultimately the company. And as we've gone through this process, we've taken that same core team, right? I talked about those 8 or 9 enterprise reps, that same core team that had been missing their number quarter after quarter, year after year, and they are now all hitting their number. They're super successful. They've stuck with us, right? So I give them a lot of credit because they've had a lot of change thrown at them in the last 3 years. So go back all the way to the initial question we talked about. They were able to adapt to that change, understand the opportunity that was in front of them, and then be able to really move forward and become super successful in this new world, right? So it really is about, are we providing them the right level of coaching? I remember when I first got here, basics like I've never had a one-on-one with my manager. I've never had a sales leader that would go out in the field and roll up their sleeves and sell, right? And that's something for me when I'm hiring leaders, that's the core thing that I look for, right? I want somebody that on the sales leadership side is hungry, driven, all the same things as a rep, except they truly love being a rep, right? It has to be somebody that loves developing people, but also loves rolling up their sleeves, jumping in the trenches and actually helping with deals, right? That's critical to us. On the customer success side, I'm going to be looking more for, are you a strong customer advocate? I can help with the sales piece of the renewals and the upsells, the cross sells, all those pieces, but I need somebody on that side that's a true customer advocate. So long answer, but that to me comes down to leadership, right? You need to be able to identify what people are good at. Everybody is good at something. Let's find out if that's a good fit for our organization, get you into that role and help make you successful.
Now, what if someone, frankly, isn't lucky enough to have a strong leadership team in place and they're going through something similar that you folks just went through recently? And whether they're, let's say, for instance, at a director level or they're an individual contributor, and they've had to navigate these waters, so to speak. What can they glean from how those folks who made the transition really well once you and the new team came on board? Like, what can they glean from their experience? Or I guess, what should they do if they don't have the benefit of this information that we're talking about here today? They'll have the benefit because they're listening, but if they don't have the leadership to sit down with them and really listen to them because they missed their quota the last several quarters and what have you. Yep. And maybe it's not even internal. Maybe they're interviewing at a new company and they're experiencing what you just mentioned that your reps were experiencing before you got there. Like, what's your advice for them to do while they're going through that change? And then also when they're sitting across from someone like you and just sort of going through their resume and their experience over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so I think on the first side of that question, what do they do while they're still there? There's always something you can learn in any environment that you're put in, right? You are going to come out stronger for going through those challenges of missing your number. You're going to learn what works and doesn't work. Now, if you truly have a leadership team that you can't be successful with and you're out interviewing and you're looking for a new role, you have to be honest. Right? All of that information is going to come through on your resume. That information is going to come through on your back channels. It's going to come through on your official references. It's a fairly small community once you get into enterprise software, and then especially once you get into cybersecurity, right? We have a lot of conversations as CROs to CROs, right? Understanding, okay, this rep was with you at one point. What do you think? Or, hey, here's a quick text message. I'm talking to so-and-so. Should I have this conversation, right? Those types of kind of back channels where you can rely on your network and your relationship. So my advice is be honest, right? Walk into that interview, walk into that meeting and say, listen, I've struggled here. This is where I've been successful throughout my career. I've always had a really good track record. I'm struggling at this business. Now, here's some of the reasons I think I'm struggling. And it's a fine line you have to walk between complaining about not being put in a position to be successful and being able to highlight, hey, these are some of the gaps that I have in my process, or these are some of the gaps that I have in my organization where I need some help and I don't feel I can get that help here, and it's time for me to look somewhere else, right? At the end of the day, we all understand that this, again, is a business that we live quarter to quarter. There are going to be people that we interview that were fired from their last job. That's okay. But you need to understand, what did you learn? How did you fail? Why did you fail? And what are you going to do differently the next time? Because if you can't articulate that, it goes back to your long division comment. You're bound to repeat it if you can't understand the process that got you there, right? It's the definition of insanity, right? You keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Well, it's the same thing here, right? And that's why we focus so much on process, because if this is not repeatable, and if you can't understand, I did A, I got to B, now what were all the pieces that got me there? Then what's the point, right? You're going to continue. Next time you might do A and you're going to get C if you don't understand what specifically did you do. So I think for me, as I talk to those folks, be honest, be authentic, explain what went wrong, and explain what you're going to do differently next time.
If you're a sales leader, let's just say, or let's say a new sales leader coming into a new organization, and they've had their struggles, as you just alluded to there. If you had to choose between you had to either choose, okay, I'm gonna work on the people, right? I'm going to make sure that I'm leveling up the team, right? Leveling up the people that are here, or I'm going to focus on the process, right? I'm going to focus on the organization as a whole. What did you do first? I guess I'll ask you that, and what's your advice on that?
Yeah, so it's a tough one, right? I mean, it's rebuilding the wings on an airplane while you're flying it at 30,000 feet, right? And for us, and the benefit I had is I came in with a strong team, right? So I came in with folks that I'd worked with before. When I first joined, I was not CRO, right? I was running one particular part of the sales organization, and I really had a strong CRO that I could rely on and learn from and ultimately get help from, right? So ultimately, I think that's the first lesson, is make sure the team that you're joining is one that you can actually count on and rely on. Because to your point, there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that are going to go wrong, and things are going to get worse before they get better. So what we did here is, number one, you have to come in and do an assessment phase, right? You have to understand what is working, what isn't working, and the why of both of those, right? Because any organization you walk into, they know their business better than you do. So to come in as an outsider and try to start making changes on day one is silly. Once you have that assessment of, okay, these are the areas that we need to fix, right? In our case, it was up-leveling our staff, and then also making sure that we had the right sales process and methodology in place. Those are really hand in hand, right? When you think about up-leveling a salesperson, typically on the enterprise side, you're not teaching them how to sell. They know how to sell. You're teaching them your messaging. You're teaching them your sales process, right? So that's where these become very intertwined, and you're able to really walk them through by, again, being in the field, going on those sales calls with them, doing coaching, and understanding that you don't treat everybody equally, right? And what I mean by that is, there are going to be some people that need more in the field. Hey, I'm going to go into this meeting with you. We're going to sell this together. There are other sales reps that say, I don't want you in my meeting. I'll tell you when I need you in my meeting, but I would love to strategize and coach with you after the call and understand, okay, this is what I heard. What do you think? And kind of do more of a coaching session. So that was one of the big learnings, is you have this team where you're going to treat them all fairly, but you aren't going to treat them differently, right? And you're going to make sure that you're playing to their strengths. You're providing them with the opportunity to be successful, and you're inserting yourself where you need to insert yourself, but not trying to take over, right? If you are going in as a sales leader and running every deal, you're a great super rep, but you're not going to help scale your organization, right? You have to be able to pass down that knowledge and that expertise that you have, pass that down to your team so that they ultimately can be successful.
Right. Yep. That makes sense. And you mentioned, going back to, again, it could be a leader, it could be an individual contributor, but they've come off a couple of tough quarters or so. What beyond what they're saying, right? The words that are coming out of the mouth are you looking for? And I guess what I'm asking is, what soft skills must be evident to you during that. And just to sort of add some foundation to this, I was talking to someone who said that one of my candidates was unapologetic in his career. In other words, to your point, he was extremely honest. He wasn't apologizing for, being honest. He was just really direct, and it was appreciated by my client, and he ended up hiring him, and he did really well. So how should they be conducting themselves on that level?
I think you just nailed it, Jay. It comes down to authenticity, right? Anyone who is in a leadership position typically can read people pretty well, right? That's ultimately why we get to the roles that we're in. And when you're sitting across from somebody and they're being authentic, and you can see that they are passionate for what they do, they care, they've made mistakes, and they own up to it and say, you know what, that was my mulligan, right? I took a flyer on that startup. I had a 6-year career at one of the big software companies. I wanted to try my hand at a startup. I didn't do great. This is why, and this is why I want to come join your organization. They've got to be whoever they are at their core, right? When you try to be inauthentic, when you try to put on that persona of somebody that you're not, people see through that really quickly. And that comes through even more evidently in an interview process, because you are typically nervous. You're trying to make a good impression, right? All of those things. So when you're trying to explain areas that you failed, own up to it. I think your candidate probably did the right thing, right? Where they sat down and they said, you know what, I'm not going to apologize for it. I made these decisions. Ultimately, I did what I thought was best for my family and for my career at the time. And you know what, I made some mistakes, but this is how I'm going to move forward. And this is why I actually care, right? If somebody sits down and has that conversation with me, that is going to go a lot further than somebody saying, oh, you know what, I came to this startup, my leader was poor, or the market wasn't right, or this wasn't right. You can explain those. Those are reasons you may have failed, but you have to own up to the fact that you were not successful and that you're going to take the next step forward. And that's ultimately why you're moving on.
Yeah. And one other thing that I'll add to that too, which is frustrating as a recruiter. Well, frankly, I guess there are a lot of things frustrating as a recruiter. But one of the things is that when the candidate won't answer your question, you're asking them just a straightforward question, and they just won't answer it. And I had an example recently. I wouldn't even say he was just lying, which basically he told me that he was let go because he had some sort of medical procedure, and after the medical procedure, he couldn't talk for a couple of weeks essentially, and so he got let go, and something just didn't add up to me. And so I said to him, I said, well, let's say for instance everything goes well, and White Hat wants to hire you, and they need to check your references. How comfortable are you giving your last hiring manager that the direct report
Right.
as a reference? Well, I didn't have a direct report. It was a startup. I didn't have a direct report, so it was just sort of, well, who fired you? Oh, the head of business development. Okay, well, that person. Can we have that person as a reference? No, because she wasn't, we weren't on the same page. I said, all right, that's all I needed to hear. Right. And so, sometimes those things just either they're not answering the question directly, or they just flat out are lying.
So again, how quickly did you read into that? Right. You identified that and uncovered that in a split second, and immediately lost all credibility, all respect. And immediately we're not going to put that person in front of your best clients.
Exactly.
Right. So right away, I mean, that goes back to the authenticity, right? For whatever reason, this person got fired. And if it's because of a medical issue, then certainly we hope they get better and all of those pieces. But if they got fired for underperformance, own up to it, right? We all suck at some point, right? You're a hero until you're not, right? And at some point you're going to miss your number. It's inevitable, no matter how great you are. I mean, I've had streaks in my career where I went 16, 17, 18 quarters without hitting my number, or with hitting my number. But guess what? At some point, I missed my number.
Right.
And that's just part of the game, right? No matter how great you are, no matter how much you prepare, how much you plan, at some point you're going to miss. And people understand that, right? I think in our world more than anywhere else, people expect you to fail. They expect you to understand why you failed, right? It goes back to what we talked about earlier. Own up to it and then move forward, right? And have a plan for how you're going to be successful this next time. And that's what it comes down to, right? Do you have the thought process and the planning ability to sit down and say, you know what, this is really where I didn't do well, but I can do better here. And these are the things I've done to improve myself since then.
Yeah.
Or these are the areas I'm coming to you as a hiring manager and saying, I need some help.
Yeah, and that's so important. And you mentioned that as your second point too, as well, a little bit earlier, is the process. And you can say
Right.
a plan as well, because that's something that you can always fall back on if you actually know how to sort of navigate and move through, as opposed to hoping and praying, or just you know I'm going to get up a little bit earlier today and work harder. You can't really
Yeah.
quantify that. You can't really bring that to the next
Right.
opportunity. All right, so
Well,
let me
and
just.
it's
Mhm.
it's interesting too, Jay. There's a saying that I've heard a lot, and it comes from a guy named Jack Napoli. So Jack is one of the founders of the medic sales process, right? So he built it when he was at PTC back in the 90s, and we use him for consulting and all that. But what he says is, you inspect what you expect, right? You have to be able to quantify. If you are trying to get to a goal, you need to inspect your process to get to that goal, which you expect to get to, right? If you're not doing that as a rep to yourself, and if you're not doing that as a sales leader to your team, then you're failing. You're not doing your job, right? You need to understand, what are the core metrics that I need to hit to set myself up for success in the future. Now, in your business, it could be 5x multiple, it could be a 10x multiple pipeline to quota. In our business, it's 3x. Whatever it is, figure it out, understand how you get there, make sure you have the tools in place to be successful. And again, inspect it, make sure you're actually hitting it.
That's why sometimes when I see people that have mechanical engineering degrees or some sort of an engineering
Yeah,
degree, and they're a salesperson, it's that left brain, right brain working together, where they can reverse
totally.
engineer a sales process and say, this is what I need to do to get there consistently,
Yep.
and they can
Yeah,
smash it.
and on that, what we've seen a lot of interesting success with is having an SDR go from kind of that sales world to the SC, sales engineer role, and be able to balance. Okay, I have that engineering background. I'm technically very smart, but I've also been a salesperson for a little while, so now I understand how to balance those two. One of my top sales leaders right now is a former sales engineer. Right, was a developer turned sales engineer turned top sales rep.
Wow.
He was the guy up on stage getting the Rolex and getting all the accolades at kickoff, and then immediately becomes one of our top performing RVP of sales.
Amazing.
So that's really where we're seeing people come from all different walks of life. They have all different backgrounds. That's why what you'll notice is, when I talked about what do I look for, I never mentioned, do they have experience in our space? I never mentioned how long have they been doing it. I don't care. If you can demonstrate that you have the DNA to truly be successful, and you have that just core innate, I'm going to run through a wall until I'm successful because I have some chip on my shoulder, right? It could be that I was told I wasn't the smartest kid in school, or whatever it might be, right? I'm going to be successful no matter what. And I have a process that I'm going to follow. The rest of it, we can train, right? You can't motivate people.
It's so funny. I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan, and some people are LeBron James fans, and who's the
Yeah.
best and all that. And I always say that one of the things that separates Michael, in my opinion, is he was cut when he was a sophomore in high school.
Right.
He was cut from the team, and he never ever forgot it. Even during his Hall of Fame speech, he was still, he was angry. He was angry at everybody, and
Right.
and it showed, right? And LeBron, on the other hand, he was never cut, and he was always just the chosen one, and he has a little bit of a less of a chip on his shoulder, in my opinion, and it shows. But one of the things you just mentioned, which to me is fascinating, he was a top sales rep, and then he became one of the top sales leaders, which often doesn't happen as well, right? So we can continue the basketball metaphor. Oftentimes these great basketball players, like Magic Johnson, who was a fantastic player, couldn't coach.
Totally.
Just wasn't that well. But it seems like that person really is the one. So I'll ask one last question, which is that if people have been listening to this and they want to get in touch with you, to say thank you for all the information you shared, but also wanting to know if they could perhaps join your team. Talk to me about, if you are hiring, if so, which positions you're hiring for, and what can people do to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of hiring. So again, when we look at our revenue organization, we really have roles open across every facet of that, right? We have openings on our service delivery side, where we need folks to come in who have that hacker mentality, that hacker background, that can come in and help deliver the service and value to our customers. On the sales side, we're hiring all across the US right now. Anyone can reach out directly to me. They can go in through our website, and ultimately reach out through our recruiting team. They can, again, come directly to any of my sales leaders and get insight into that. So some of the roles we have open, we're hiring enterprise reps in Melbourne or Sydney, Australia. We're building out a team in Florida. We're hiring SDRs out of Houston. We've got sales engineers open in Chicago, in Melbourne, Sydney, sales engineer here in New England, and then also hiring an RVP of sales in the central US. So we have some really awesome opportunities and looking to get kind of that killer sales leader to come in and help take us to the next level. And I've been really lucky with the team we have in place. I have an awesome VP of sales. I have an awesome head of customer success. And now we need to help them build out their teams as well as they look to bring on their leadership teams.
Fantastic. And this, to spell the name, and you'll see it obviously when if you're looking at your device on the podcast, but it's David, David, and then Gerry, Gerry. I believe on LinkedIn it's Dave, Gerry, Dave.
It is.
Yeah. Yep. So you can find him there that way as well. And Dave, I want to thank you for spending some time here today. And as always, I learn a lot during these interviews. So I appreciate you answering my questions and sharing all that with me. And I know that the listeners are going to get a lot out of this as well. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
You have just gone over quota. Goodbye, awesome. Everybody.